So my name is Dena Eakles, and I'm president of Echo Valley Hope. It's a little nonprofit, educational nonprofit in the sticks, rural Wisconsin, up by the Driftless. And I'm a board member of WNPJ. And I'm really grateful to be here today. I'm really grateful to the people who are taking the time on Zoom, and probably the people who will be listening to this after the fact. And I'm really happy that we decided to take up abolition. This isn't just for this event, but we've decided as a board to make it be the focus of our year. And I know I've learned so much in the past year about abolition, and I know I will continue to learn. Because from what I can tell, it's a personal journey. You know, there are many things that we have to take down and we have to change, no question about it. But we need to be strong. And I looked at the abolitionists historically, and I looked at the abolitionists today. And I see that it takes incredible courage. It takes persistence. It takes a love of humanity that comes from a love of self. I've never understood the injustices I've seen in my life or been privy to. I've never understood it. And to be able to be a part of an organization and to watch and witness people who, in whatever way they can, are fighting these things. We need a shared understanding. We need to trust one another. We need to trust ourselves. And this is what we can do. We've listened to very loud voices for a very long time, but they have been the minority. Those people who preach hate. I live in the middle of it. Come visit me. But I find that with persistence, with courage, with love, people change. We have to do this. We have to raise the voice. So I have an incredible honor to introduce someone that the first time I met was actually on a Zoom call during the pandemic. Didn't really meet, just listened. Don't even know what Zoom call it was. At that point, I was just trying to listen to whatever I could get a hold of, you know, to see how we could stay together, right? And I heard this voice, and where I live, I barely have internet. So I was just listening. I couldn't see the face. Who was that person? So passionate, so clear. And I knew that voice needed to reach more people. So Echo Valley Hope, we do a thing called Widening the Circle. We've done it for the last few years during the pandemic. And I invited Angela Harris to speak. And once again, I was blown away. Once again, I learned, more the depth of the possibility of what it means to move towards abolition. I don't want to see WNPJ or any of us succumb to just another label. We have to take to heart and live as I've watched her do. This is the first time we physically are meeting, but I know you are my sister. And I'm thrilled to introduce you all, if you haven't met her or heard of her, Angela Harris.
I'm so honored to be in this space, and I really appreciate the opportunity provided to me by the Wisconsin Network for Peace and Justice and Echo Valley Hope. I want to say congratulations to the honorees. Like, you've been doing this work for as long as I've been alive. So that's a compliment. That's a compliment. And so it's just really humbling to be sitting here in this space with you all. So we're going to talk a little bit about abolition today. I don't know if we're necessarily going to be able to get to the point where we're addressing the root causes of violence, because there's so many, but I think that we'll be able to learn a little bit about abolitionist work, what it means to be an abolitionist, and how to get started. And so for today's presentation, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about abolition. We're going to do a little bit of work around understanding the system and how we are a part of this system. We're going to talk about some tangible ways to get started, right? Like, folks always want to know, how did you become an abolitionist? And it's always a funny question because I'm like, but we're going to talk about how you can get started. We're going to talk about the most important parts of abolition, though, those last two: freedom dreaming and hope and Black joy. Those are the two most important things. So if you don't leave with anything else today, I want you to leave with the freedom dream. And so this is me. It's a really big face. But I'm Angela Harris. I guess I would consider myself to be an abolitionist teacher. I'm not quite sure of when I gleaned that label, but I've been teaching at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School for the last 7 years. And if you all aren't familiar with Dr. King, it's on 3rd and Martin Luther King Drive. It is an African-American immersion school. And I think it is so important that I name that that's what my school is and that's what my school does, because my school represents the only public African-American immersion school in the United States of America. And so we have been in existence for 30 years. And so I believe that the fact that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. School exists as an African-American immersion school is within itself an abolitionist practice, right? Because Dr. King, it was in the 90s when parents, community leaders, school board members, all came together to decide that they wanted to disrupt the educational survival complex. And so I'm going to use that term today when I'm talking about education, the education survival complex, which means that our education is creating spaces where Black and brown children in particular are only surviving and not thriving. And so they came together to disrupt this educational survival complex that was disproportionately failing our Black children, Black boys in specific. And so this event and other events are part of an abolitionist history that I believe exists here in Milwaukee, and a history that remains present through me today. So I want to be fully transparent with you all. There was an incident that occurred with me. And so I stand before you today as an abolitionist teacher who has recently experienced harm at the hands of the educational survival complex, a system that I mentioned merely allows Black children to survive instead of thrive. I find myself in a situation where I was attacked and forced to rely upon the state that I know doesn't always provide us with the protection or the justice that we deserve. And so parts of me really struggled today when I thought about coming here to speak with you all about abolition, knowing that I had this situation happen with me. And so I dealt heavily with imposter syndrome and what it would mean to talk about abolition, knowing that I had to rely on the system, a system that I know that I'm working hard to disrupt. And so being deeply loved unconditionally by my community is what helped me be here today and what is helping me get through this. But somebody in my community reminded me, she said, Angela, there is no equivalent for 911. And the choice of not dealing with the state at all is an illusion that's only accessible to the most privileged. I don't have that access presently. And so today, I want to lean into the strength of the Black women abolitionists that came before me. Women like Frances C. Harper up there at the top. Frances C. Harper was an abolitionist, a suffragist, a poet, an activist, a teacher, a public speaker, and a writer who in 1845 became the first Black woman to have any literary work published in the United States of America. Women like Elizabeth Freeman, down there in the bottom at the blue, in the blue. She's also known as Beck and was the first enslaved Black person to file and win a freedom lawsuit in Massachusetts. And then last but not least, the mother of abolition, Sojourner Truth, who was an abolitionist and women's rights activist and an enslaved person who escaped to her freedom with her infant daughter. In 1828, she went to court to recover her son and was the first Black woman to win a case against white men. I am because they are, and because they are, therefore I am. It is because of them that I stand here before you today. So, abolition. What is it? What it isn't. We're going to talk a little bit about abolition, what it is, and the misconceptions that folks have about abolition. So I remember when I first started like throwing the term around abolition in speaking engagements and meetings, and especially as it related to education here in Milwaukee. And people, there would be almost like an immediate pushback from folks, right? Like they would be like, well, we can't just tear it down if we don't have anything else to replace it with. And so as we start to consider what it means to be an abolitionist, and envisioning a more just world, you may be questioning, is abolition too drastic? Is it too drastic of an approach? Can we really change all of these systems? Is it possible to dismantle the education survival complex and get rid of prisons and policing altogether? Are those things possible? Well, I'm going to say, sorry, you all. I'm going to tell you that we can, we must, and we will get rid of those systems. Abolition, whether it's education or prison abolition, is not an approach. It's a way of life, a political vision, a way of seeing the world and taking action against injustice. So some folks will hear the word abolition and view it negatively, a tear down everything and fix it later type of approach. Instead, I argue that abolition is a positive re-envisioning of a world where we have everything that we need: food, shelter, education, health, art, clean water, beauty, clean air, and all of the things that are necessary to our personal and community safety. So, I saw that book out here, We Do This Till We Free Us. This is one of the texts that I am centering this work today, but really my abolitionist work in general. So in her book, We Do This Till We Free Us, Miriam Carver teaches us that every vision is also a map. So envisioning a better future also acts as a map to help us get there. So when we begin to think about those freedom dreams, when we begin to engage in collective work with our community and build those freedom dreams, we're actually creating the map for our future. It also helps, it's also through the words of freedom fighters like Kwame Ture, who reminds us of the real goal of revolution. And so he states, when you see people calling themselves revolutionary, always talking about destroying, but never talking about building or creating, they're not revolutionary. They don't understand the first thing about revolution. Revolution is creating. And so abolition is a positive project, you all. Abolition is not negative. Abolition is not about tearing down. Abolition is a positive project that focuses on building a society that creates educational spaces where Black children aren't simply surviving, they're thriving. And where it's possible to address harm, like the harm that happened to me, without having to rely on the current structural systems that oppress us. One of my favorite drawings. When we think about the system, right, there's always this necessity to want to reform the system. And we see reforms in education like No Child Left Behind. And this cartoon is so funny to me because she's like, look, class, I'm not crazy about this either because of all of the hoops that they have to jump through related to No Child Left Behind. But my favorite part is when the teacher says, but what really fries me is that I have to pay for the hoops because that's my life as an educator. So we will get a reform in our classroom spaces, and then it becomes our responsibility to ensure that we are implementing that reform with fidelity. So when we think of the system, history has shown us that we have to do more than just change, adjust, or reform even a single piece of this oppressive system, because another piece is simply just going to pop back up in its place. It is important to not start this journey even thinking about our current system and what we have in place and how we can make that better. Instead, we need to ask ourselves, what are our freedom dreams for our children, for our community, for our world? As I practice the harm that has occurred to me as an abolitionist, I understand that abolition does not mean that the world will be free from harm. Abolitionist thinking takes us on a different journey that does more than just replace oppressive structures with a different version of the same oppressive structure. So we want to talk about freedom dreaming. So Dr. Bettina Love tells us, dreams grounded in critique of injustice, these dreams are not whimsical, unattainable daydreams. They are critical and imaginative dreams of collective resistance. She told us that in her text, we want to do more than survive, another one of the anchor texts in my abolitionist journey. So I by no means you all am sitting up here purporting to have all of the answers about abolitionism and what it means to be an abolitionist. And I don't think that really any of us do, because if we did, we would be living our freedom dream right now and we wouldn't be talking about it. But as long as we keep freedom dreaming, the type of world that we want, working in collaboration with one another like you all are doing, trying new strategies and learning from our mistakes, new possibilities for a better future will bloom. So where do we start? Number one, the most important part, whenever I'm talking, I probably even brought this up in my time at Echo Valley, when I talk about equity work, anti-racism work, abolition work, it starts to transforming yourself. That's number one. Number two is you have to have the ability to freedom dream and freedom dream collectively with community. And the third and most easy part is just to change everything. So first, before we can transform society, we have to transform ourselves. Our ability to freedom dream and to dream of a world free of oppressive structures can be limited. We have to remember, you all, that we are also deeply embedded in these systems and in these structures that exist and that we're fighting to change. Issues like white supremacy, misogyny, classism, ableism, racism, transphobia, and homophobia are all internalized by even the most principled of us. I'm standing here today in front of you telling you that I internalize white supremacy. I internalize transphobia. I internalize racism and misogyny. I internalize ableism. And so we have so deeply internalized these qualities of oppression that if oppression somehow magically ended today, we all walk outside, oppression's gone, yay. We are likely to recreate the same oppressive structures that existed before. Being authentic is the most important part. Being authentic and intentional in our relationships with one another and working collectively, not in silos, not as individuals, helps us to not only freedom dream possibilities for a new world, but freedom dream possibilities for ourselves. It's one of my favorite freedom dreamers right there, Ella Baker. So second, we must have the ability to imagine, build, and experiment with new structures that allow us to become more principled in our actions. Abolition moves beyond gimmicks and quick fixes to examine the root causes of these systems and how they function within us. So I like to call Ella Baker the coalition builder. And so thinking like her, she, I feel to me, is one of the most often overlooked political organizers and activists and educators whose work was centered in the belief, and this is a direct quote from her, that strong people don't need strong leaders. To me, that means that if we give the community everything that they need to be strong, there won't have to be an Angela Harris. There won't have to be a Dr. King or a Malcolm X. She was a coalition builder, like I said, and was fundamental in establishing organizations that I'm sure you all are familiar with, like SCLC and SNCC and the Southern Conference Education Fund. She approached her work though through a dismantling of hierarchy. She believed in participatory democracy, which rejected top-down, male-centered leadership. She believed in the power of the people and communities to create pathways to leadership for all. She believed in the collective and individual brilliance of our community and wanted them to believe in it for themselves. If we take our lead from an activist like Ms. Baker, abolition should be built on the brilliance and wealth of our children, our communities, and it should be built, we should be creating in unison with these communities and facilitating interactions that build trust. I think that's the part that people miss, right? When you're going to work into the community, the first thing that you need to do before you ask the community for anything is to build trust with them. We need to build communities where people matter to each other and fight together to create a home that reflects their hopes and dreams and counteracts oppression, all while trying to build a new future at the same time. Sounds daunting, doesn't it? I don't know if you all have noticed, but I really today was very intentional about centering strong Black voices. And so, third and finally, the most important part, we must change everything. This is Ruth Wilson Gilmore, and she reminds us that abolition requires that we change one thing, which is everything. Abolition is not absences, abolition is presence. All of these systems of oppression that we're talking about, dismantling, are interlocked in their logic and operations with all the other systems, from how Black children are disproportionately funneled into the school-to-prison pipeline because they don't perform as expected, to how folks with disabilities are excluded access to our communities, and the ways that workers are undervalued by this capitalistic system. Changing everything might seem like an insurmountable task, but it also means that there's so many possibilities, you all, that there's so many places that we could get started. So starting your abolitionist journey shouldn't begin with questions about what we already have and how we can make it better. It should begin with imagining what we can freedom dream for our children, for ourselves, our community, and the world. If we do that, then the infinite possibilities for change of a world free from oppression is waiting for us. So I'm going to leave y'all with two things. This is one of my favorite quotes, and it's been resonating deeply with me after everything that's happened. It's a reminder. Miriam Makaba says, hope is a discipline. And it must be practiced every single day. I think in the world that we live in presently, it's really easy to get bogged down with feelings of hopelessness. That things are bad all the time. We get on our phones, on Facebook, on TikTok, or on Twitter, and you're doom scrolling, and you see all of the horrible things that are happening and the bad that's happening all the time. And you begin to feel like nothing will ever change. There's so many present day examples, Herschel Walker, that make it feel like it's being proven to us, right, in multiple different ways. And so it's understandable that people might feel hopeless. But if we are to transform our community, remember, we first have to transform ourselves. So this starts with choosing to think differently. It starts with choosing to act differently. It starts with choosing to trust differently. Meaning, trusting people, even in the moments when they prove they cannot be trusted. Hope is believing that in spite of what you see every day, a better world is possible. Hope is a long-term journey. A long-term journey of understanding that we are just a small part of the story. And we're planting seeds in others and in ways that we may never see right. That's the reality, you all. When the story is told of how oppression ended, because that's my freedom journey, when that story is told, my name likely won't end up in the book. A lot of our names likely will not end up in the book. But for me, the work that I'm doing, if it touches just 1 or 2 souls in the world, then I'm grateful. If the work that I'm doing, that I'm taking a stand on, benefits my community in any way, I'm grateful. If the labor that I give to my community helps a fellow community member, then I am grateful. And that's hope. The last thing, and I think the most important for me, is joy. And particularly Black joy, as I'm a Black woman. But again, Dr. Love tells us, joy is crucial for social change. Joy is crucial for teaching. Finding joy in the midst of pain and trauma is the fight to be fully human. And I'm so glad that we came here together today in joy to honor folks who have done this work and have proven to be assets to our community and transforming our community. And so when we, especially us folks of color, make space for joy, we are recognizing in that moment our full humanity, our strength, our resilience, our determination. Black feminist Brittany Cooper reminds us that joy is critical to reinvigorating our capacity for a new vision. When we don't have joy, we don't have compassion. We don't have self-care. We don't have self-love. We don't have grace for others or ourselves. Then it becomes easy to slip back into that hopelessness. There's no world, you all, for abolitionist practice that I believe in a society that often not just tells us, but shows us that we don't matter. Black joy is about embracing who we are despite that fact. It's important that the white folks in this room also embrace Black joy. You embrace Black joy by listening to, advocating for, and creating opportunities for Black people to win. White folks embracing Black joy simply looks like loving and seeing Black folks express their joy, loving and seeing Black folks win, thrive, and honor their history and become fully themselves. So, in conclusion, abolition requires a commitment to transform oneself. A commitment to transform oneself in order to transform the community and in order to transform the world. It demands an ability to freedom dream. An ability to freedom dream something different for our children, something different for ourselves, something different for our community, something different for our world. Through this freedom dreaming process, we will begin to change every single system that oppresses us. We must remember to continue to be disciplined in our hope that this system one day will change and we must remember to make space for ourselves to feel and experience joy even in our darkest moments. This is one of my favorite quotes. When I've done protests at the end of meetings, sometimes at the end of presentations like I'm gonna do today. And so how it works is I say, you repeat after me, and we just increasingly get louder and louder. I'm a teacher, you all sound like that. And it goes like this: it's our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to fight. It is our duty to win. It is our duty. We must love and support each other. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. We have nothing to lose but our chains. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. It is our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. We have nothing to lose but our chains. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. It is our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. 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 I want to thank WNJ so much for having me today. I want to thank Echo Valley. I want to thank you all for sharing this space in my room, in this room with me today. I'm Angela Harris. Have a good afternoon.